Darling, I do something today. Alright, in all seriousness, editorial photography. The first thing that comes to mind when you hear editorial photography might be a magazine or newspaper. And you would be right. The original use of editorial photography was exactly that. It would be the non-commercial photographs included in various publications alongside of an article. Though often found in the same magazines, newspapers, and online platforms, it is distinct from commercial photography, which is used for advertising. It also differs from photojournalism and documentary photography, which both focus more on capturing events, people, and life as it is without external influence. Editorial photography is a combination of storytelling, creative representation of a subject, such as a person, an organization, or maybe even an event, and illustrating an article. Editorial photography provides an aesthetic element to draw readers into exploring an article they might not have found interest in otherwise. Or it can help visually demonstrate certain aspects of that article in a way words would not be able to adequately demonstrate. Even though editorial photography has traditionally always been published alongside of an article, today the term has been developed to include a certain style of standalone images. When this style is used on its own without an accompanying written narrative, it will still imply a narrative or outline a creative concept through a strong sense of visual storytelling. However, unlike photojournalism, which is usually captured in an unstaged documentary style, editorial photographs are more planned out, requiring more time and preparation in making sure that the creative vision is fully captured in the end result. There are incredibly vast applications to editorial photography, in a similar way to how a photojournalist might find themselves photographing many different subjects, such as athletes, politicians, actors, entrepreneurs, schoolchildren, and so many more. The variety of opportunities for editorial photography are even more vast, essentially including any subject you could think of, from documenting menu items of a certain restaurant to capturing the intricate process of artisan weavers. Any topic or person which inspires interest can be captured through editorial photography. For those photos to be shared either independently or alongside an article featuring the same subject. Photojournalism tends to capture things in a more natural way, where editorial photography tends to be more intimate or elaborate in the way that the narrative of a certain person, event, piece of architecture, etc. is highlighted. Certain subjects, most notably fashion photos, require a lot less text to describe or explain, allowing the photographs, especially if done in an editorial style, to take center stage. Since this type of subject material is represented so much better in a visual format, designers will work closely with editorial photographers to capture their clothes in a creative way. This is often an opportunity for the photographer to also lend their own personal and creative styles to the photos. As I mentioned at the start of this video, newspapers and magazines will normally have 3 different styles of photography: editorial, photojournalistic, and lastly, commercial. Commercial photography, just as it sounds, is much more focused on a specific business or commercial enterprise. This can be through advertisements, brochures, and similar things. This might focus on exactly the same content as an editorial or even the photojournalistic photographs, but the intent is far more centered around generating revenue, or more correctly, centered around commerce. In many cases, this requires a more formal approach, especially in creating curated representations of products or services. Licensing of the photographs is another big difference between editorial and commercial photography. Editorial photographs, you will usually only be allowed to use them in a single publication, whether digitally or in print. However, in commercial photography, you will often be able to use those photos as far and wide as you would like, within the reach of your company or brand, such as websites, advertising, business cards, and pretty much everything else. Editorial photography might seem like a great space for creativity to thrive, but there are still boundaries to what you can do. When the editorial photographer is hired for a project, they will still have to follow a brief which helps guide them in bringing together a vision that best complements the article it will be accompanying. Depending on the subject, the publication, and your level of experience, the guidelines will be more or less strenuous, allowing you different levels of freedom. At the end of the day, I think there are two big keys to creating memorable editorial photographs, and they go hand in hand. You need to become an expert in creative storytelling. Not only displaying your subject in a unique and creative way, but telling a story with your images to reveal something about that subject which might not previously have been apparent. An important step in achieving this is researching your subject. Find out not only what might seem interesting on the surface, but what interesting aspects could be a little more hidden away. What parts of your subject do you find important to focus on or avoid? Then ask how you can creatively bring this to the fore. Plan and prepare so that you are ready when you arrive at the shoot. It is also important for editorial photography to remain respectful. Everything I have said so far discusses the traditional form of editorial photography. However, it is a style which has in recent years been used to describe a wider range of photography, especially wedding photography. I must admit it is only when editorial wedding photography became popular that I first became familiar with the term editorial photography. Mostly because it is an industry which I have been more involved with than many other photography industries. Essentially, what editorial wedding photography does is it emulates the style of photographs which you would find in a magazine. Typically, the photos you see from a wedding, which you imagine could have been taken directly out of a Vogue magazine, is a typical example of editorial wedding photography. My favorite types of wedding galleries will have a majority documentary-style photographs, especially from the ceremony and reception, complemented by a curated set of editorial photos, usually taken during the portrait session of the wedding. In my opinion, this gives you the best of both worlds. It captures the real moments from the very special day, while also giving you the types of portraits which make you feel like a supermodel. Having given you an idea of what editorial photography is, and kind of also where it's developing and how it's developing into something somewhat new, I want to also just talk about how I personally relate to editorial photography, what I love about it, and where I see the greatest potential from it. I think that especially as photography has become so common and so easy to access, where everyone basically has a camera, whether it is on their phone or if they have their own digital cameras. Film cameras are making a big comeback as well. People tend to always have cameras and are constantly taking photos. And what I love about editorial photography is how it is a more curated form of photography, how it is something a little more special. And even if you're not actually publishing those photos, having a photographer who has an editorial style can really just give you those photos that are a little bit extra, have a little more effort put into them, and tell a story on a deeper level than a simple photograph taken to capture a moment or a person without really digging deeper into who that person is or what that moment represents. Like I mentioned, the development of editorial wedding photography has been growing exponentially, and I really love it. I don't think that you should necessarily try and have your entire wedding photographed in an editorial style, but that is also partially just a preference of my own. I think that if you mix a few styles into your wedding, you really will get the best results, simply because your wedding is so multifaceted. There's so many elements, so many aspects to a wedding that I think it is best captured through various styles of photography, not just one style of photography. However, if you want to go full-on editorial and really have that incredibly curated experience for every single moment, then by all means go ahead and do that. I do think editorial photography can also come into play with other photo shoots, whether it is having a family shoot, whether it's doing your own portraits individually. The style of curating something around a story and a message that gets told through a visual narrative, even finding a photographer, and I've seen this is fairly rare, but having photographers you can hire personally who will both photograph you and write about your story. I think that that is another great example of editorial photography coming into a more commonplace style that people have access to, which is really great. Also making personalized photo books and photo magazines that you can keep in your home. I feel like that is a great modern take on having a photo album at home, where instead of having simply an album that you slide printed pictures in, you can have, there's multiple websites, online shops, and even in-person shops, if your photographer won't be able to do this for you personally, that you can ask them and even set it up yourself using their templates, put together the gallery that you have, or a set of galleries, different photos you have from your family, for you personally, or even your business if you feel like it, putting it into a photo book or a photo magazine that you can keep for yourself at home or at work, I think is a really great way. Editorial photos, or using your photos in an editorial way that you can see them more every day and they don't just get lost on a hard drive or a cell phone somewhere and you never look at them. But it's a step above having simply a gallery, having simply an album of printed photos that might even seem less interesting than having a curated set of magazines or photo books that you've created for yourself. I think the possibilities with editorial photography and editorial style shoots are truly endless, and it really is whatever you want to make it. So take that step and maybe just put a little extra effort into your next photo shoot from your side as the client, but also look for a photographer that might be willing to add that extra step and just take a little more time to develop a brief and put together a photo shoot that's more than just taking pictures, that really has that editorial element, and maybe even add a written article or something about yourself that's a little personalized, whether it's letters or notes or something that you add alongside it, and then get it printed. Make yourself a magazine, make yourself a book, make yourself a newspaper. Another thing that I really love is seeing all of these wedding newspapers that people have, and then you get to also incorporate that into your next set of photos. Let me know if you guys like the idea of editorial photography and also enjoy the idea maybe of bringing an element of editorial photography into your personal photos. Let me know any ideas that you have or any ways that you would personally style your own editorial shoots. I would just love to hear how you guys view this style of photography and whether it's something that speaks to you.